So hi, everyone. Welcome again to the Melikian Center event, the North Caucasus in Contemporary Russian Literature, a Writer's Perspective. My name is Irina Levin, and I'm the Associate Director of the Melikian Center. And it is with pleasure that I introduce our guest today, Azamat Gabuev, who is currently a visiting scholar at Cornell University as part of the Fulbright program. And at Cornell, he's teaching Russian short stories and participating in all the grandeur that is university life. As a writer, he deals with Russia in the modern world, including globalization, gender, and focusing on the North Caucasus. And in his first book, he looked at the lack of choice for young women in a semi-traditional society. And in his next book, highly anticipated next book, he's going to be focusing on the myths surrounding Stalin in today's conservative circles. So without further ado, I hand it over to Azamat.
Thank you, Professor Levin, for inviting me. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. And just to give me a second to launch my presentation. So now you see it. Okay. I want us first to look at the title and to understand some terms. You see that some words are colored, and it's not for fun. It's because these are the terms that I think need to be cleared up. We should understand what we mean by saying North Caucasus, by saying contemporary, and by saying Russian. So let's start with North Caucasus. In geography, it's usually defined as the territory which is limited by Caucasian mountains on the south, Caspian Sea on the east, and Black and Azov Seas on the west. But when we take this definition, we face the question, should we include Astrakhan or Kalmykia or Rostov-on-Don in North Caucasus? And the answers are various. Politically, it's even more complicated. For example, in Soviet Union, there was North Caucasian military district, which stretched up to Volgograd. But today we realize that Volgograd is not Caucasus at all. Today we have federal districts. Those are huge units upon the regions, and Krasnodar Krai and Adygea are included in Southern Federal District, and other North Caucasian regions are included in North Caucasian Federal Districts. It's weird because Krasnodar Krai has Caucasian mountains in it, and Adygea is the place where Adygs live, and Adygs are the people of North Caucasus. So I suggest considering North Caucasus as this colored territory because first, it includes Caucasian mountains. Second, those are the regions where the peoples of Caucasus live more or less compactly. What about Russian? I think Kafka best represents the troubles with literary identity. He was Jewish ethnically, he wrote in German, he lived in Prague, which now is Czechia, but back then it was Austro-Hungarian Empire. So what kind of writer is he? I also like to ask, why do we call James Joyce Irish author, and why don't we call Nikolai Gogol an Ukrainian author? And I don't want us to get involved into this argument, but for the sake of this lecture, I suggest the simplest way to define Russian as written in Russian, regardless of the author's ethnicity or nationality. It also helps us to separate proper Russian literature from the literatures written in the local languages, which are completely different. And next, how do you define contemporary? I know that in the US, contemporaneity is often and usually understood as since 1945, but this approach couldn't be applied to Russian literature, I think, because in Soviet Union, we had the same socialist realism before World War II and after this. And for the immigrant literature, maybe the Civil War matters more, much more than World War II. Some say that something changed during the perestroika, because the literature that was prohibited before started getting published. But I don't think that we can count contemporary literature from 1985, the beginning of perestroika, because it was what we call возвращенная литература, the returned literature. Those were the authors from Gumilev to Solzhenitsyn that were prohibited and now that got published, but it wasn't you. I think maybe the best way to define contemporary Russian literature is to find the spot where something was allowed. And in 1990, the censorship in Soviet Union was canceled, and maybe it's the best point from which we can say now it's contemporary. But some say also that contemporary Russian literature is associated with contemporary Russia. So it's after the dissolution of Soviet Union. Anyway, all three point of views can be applied to this lecture, because the most early work that I'm going to mention was written in 1994. So this doesn't matter. I just wanted to show the difference between American and Russian context and understanding of contemporary. So as I said, the first work was written in 1994. So in 1994, the first Chechen war starts. And Vladimir Makanin writes his story, The Prisoner of the Caucasus. By this time, Vladimir Makanin is a big author. He has Russian Booker Prize and other prizes. And he turns to such complex topic. And it's, I think, quite remarkable because in Russian literature, North Caucasus began with the war, and it was brought back by war. And in the very title of the story, Makanin refers us to the 19th century literature, because there were 3 prisoners of the Caucasus in 19th century. And when you look at the English titles, you won't see the difference. They are all translated as the prisoner. Sometimes it's captive, but not prisoner. But anyway, you don't see the difference. But if you look at the Russian title, you see that Makanin's story differs. So why did he change the suffix? Formally, it's because the word plennik sounds archaic. We don't say plennik today, we say plenny. But I think it's just the surface, and in this change of suffix, there is a message. He wants to tell us, look, I'm going to tell the classical story, but it's not exactly the same. As you remember, in Pushkin, Lermontov, and Tolstoy prisoners, there was a Russian soldier captured by Chechens or by Kabardians, and then escaping with the help of a girl who fell in love with him. But In Makanin's story, the prisoner is the young Chechen militia boy captured by Russian soldiers. It's different, is the deconstruction of the classical narrative. And he also disputes with Dostoevsky with his statement that the beauty saves the world. In the beginning of the story, Russian soldier, who is the protagonist, feels the contradiction between the beauty of the Caucasian mountains and the nature generally, and the war, which is not beautiful at all. And then when he captures that boy, he gets fascinated by his beauty. He almost falls in love with him, but he has to kill him because it's war. So in Makanin's world, beauty doesn't save. We ourselves kill the beauty. And this is a very delicate approach to such complex topic as the Chechen war and war in general. But this approach was not developed further, neither in fiction nor in movies. And by the beginning of the Second Chechen War, we have very and pure battle fiction starring Zahar Prilepin. Zahar Prilepin himself was a member of Spetsnaz during First Chechen War. And his novel, The Pathologist, tells us about a Spetsnaz squad mopping up Grozny. The Chechens here are reduced to the function. They barely say 2 sentences during the whole novel. They emerge only to shoot and more likely to get shot. So it was written in 2005 and published in 2005, and in 2006 Zahar Prilepin came to Lipki. Lipki is a retreat near Zvenigorod where all Russian forum of young writers used to take place for many years. I also was there in 2006. I was 21. I had published 3 stories by that time, and they had nothing to do with my homeland, with North Caucasus. They were set in the abstract city, and the characters had names like Anna or Alexanders, which can meet whenever and wherever. I thought this is literature avoiding the certain places. And I was assigned to one of the workshops where Zahar Prilepin was among masters. But I want to tell you about the other author who was among the participants along with me. His name is German Sadulaev. By that time, he had just released his compilation of stories called I Am a Chechen. I call this moment the moment of empowerment because regardless of previous authors' political position or aesthetic position, they produced the external point of view, and Sadulaev gives us the other perspective, the perspective of Chechen. He recollects the Chechen War in this book. He reflects on his Chechen identity, and the proper title of this book is declarative. I am Chechen. Listen to me. I too have something to say. And I think from this moment, from the release of this book, Caucasian authors in contemporary Russian literature started speaking on their own behalf. As for the Sadulaev's reflection on his identity. I like most this idea that Chechens are created as a solid nation by Russians, by their hatred, by the policy, by discrimination. So here you can see the quote, in which this idea is more elaborate. So I think this book is, regardless of its pros and cons, it's a milestone. But let's move further, because next, Alisa Ganieva emerged in 2 years from publishing German Sadulaev's compilation. It was kind of literary mystification, because she submitted her novella Salam Dalgat to debut literary prize, and she used a pen name, Gula Hirachev. She even had a picture of that guy, Gula Hirachev. And when she explains why she needed this, she says that she had been already known as a literary critic, and she didn't want the jury to be biased, but she needed a male pen name because the world of this novella is totally men's world. And then she received this debut prize, and she received a lot of complimentary critical response, but simultaneously she received a lot of hatred from her fellow people of Dagestan, because they were disappointed that Dagestan was depicted without heroical pathos, without complementary approach to its history and its contemporaneity and so on. So as for the plot of the novella, it's rather simple. A young Avar, whose name is Dalgat, rambles across Makhachkala. He meets some people, he gets involved into conversations. One guy tells him about his sexual experience. The other guy tries to convert him into Salafism. He visits a library where some poetry presentation takes place. Then he ends up at wedding where local attorney gets killed. That's it. But it's not about plot. It's about the portrait of the society, and it's about language, because the language was revolutionary. There are a lot of Avar and Arab words incorporated into Russian text, and the syntax of the Russian sentences is broken, and it may be called even wrong, because this language was based on the real Makhachkala street speech. Is the first representation of such a linguistic layer, and I think this book matters also because it first leads us away from Chechnya and away from the war, and shows that there are other peoples in North Caucasus. I want to give a quick review of other Ganieva's books, because I think they are remarkable. Her first novel, The Mountain and the Wall, actually it's not quite correct translation, because Праздничная гора is something like celebration mountain, but there is a wall in the novel. There is a wall built between Russia and North Caucasus, so it's a speculative dystopia. And when the wall is built, something goes wrong, not something, but maybe everything goes wrong. There is a rise of crime, the rise of fundamentalism, the rise of local chauvinism, like Lesbian chauvinism or Kumyk chauvinism. And finally, there is a war. I think it's the most ambiguous work by Alicia Ganieva, because in one hand, it was like a response to some Russian chauvinistic ideas, like to build the wall. But in the other hand, the idea that we can't carry on without Russia is a bit colonial in its core. But her next book, the novel Bride and Groom, I think is the most compelling book of hers. There are two protagonists, female protagonist and male protagonist. They are both from Dagestan, but they live in Moscow, and they come from Moscow to their small hometown. And there they are surrounded by parents, siblings, cousins, and they all want to marry them off. It's especially hard for the girl because they say that she's 25 and she's going to be an old maid, so they should hurry up. As for the guy, his mother tells him that the banquet hall is already rented, the date of the wedding is appointed, and all they should do is to find the bride quickly. There is a vivid depiction of the downtown of this town in this novel. The downtown is totally about marriage and wedding. There are boutiques, there are banquet halls for rent, and so on. And the female character, she says, it's like there is nothing else to do but getting married. So I think that the trope of marriage is important for contemporary literature on North Caucasus, because it can show first local customs, traditions, and second, it shows the contradictions, the controversies within the families that sometimes tear families and even society apart. And let's get back to Lipki. In 2013, I came there again. As long as I was older, I'm showing you the winter landscape. Alicia Ganieva was there as a star, but I want to tell about the other author that I met there in workshop that I was involved in. Her name is Stella Prudont. She is a mountain Jew, and she writes about mountain Jews living in Petrogorsk. I think some readers didn't even know about such people before reading this book, her first novella called The Dame. And realizing this, she put the brief history of her people into the text. A little girl asks an old woman, why are we mountain Jews? Are there desert Jews or forest Jews? And the old woman answers, and she tells that after ancient Israel was destroyed by Romans, some Jews went west and they started speaking Yiddish, and some Jews went east and they started speaking Farsi, and now they are in North Caucasus and even South Caucasus. know that the central character of this novella is an old woman too. She is a mother and grandmother of the big family, and she is authoritarian. She decides for her children and grandchildren when to get married and when to get divorced. She can't even take one of her grandchildren away from their parents and raise him or her as her own child. But regardless of this, the society depicted in this novella is patriarchal, and if you read this, you'll see how patriarchy creates such kind of women. And again, we meet this trope of vetting in this novella. But let's get to the most, I think, most important part, and my favorite book here. I am Ossetian, and my first novel is about my homeland, North Ossetia. We in Ossetia don't have arranged marriages or something like that, but the idea that every girl should get married is still very strong there. And I wrote this novel on behalf of two young women, which represent the different reaction to this social demand. One tries to conform, the other tries not to conform. One tries to make her boyfriend make her a proposal, and the other rejects a proposal of her boyfriend. They know each other, they hate each other, but I doubt if they can exist without each other, because they exist in opposition, and for each of them, the other represents the model that she doesn't want to reproduce. As for the language, I too use not only Russian language, I incorporate Ossetian words into the text, and I also make a lot of references to Ossetian culture, songs, folklore, Nart saga. But I do even more references to pop culture. For example, one of the characters sees Betty Short in her nightmare, and the title of the novel was inspired by Foo Fighters, I mean, rock band. I think this novel couldn't be written any other way, because this mix of the local and global culture is the context where the characters live and where I live. So I never wanted this novel to be locked within the region. First, it was published in short version in October, the literary magazine, and I knew that they had a section called The Literature from North Caucasus, and I made preventive dramatics not to get there into this section, and I managed it. It was published in a section called New Names. And finally, I want to tell a bit about a new book by Stella Prudont, which was released recently. I'm not going to elaborate on that. I just want to tell about one thing that I think is good to end the circle of this lecture. So there is a Chechen war, and the Jewish family from Grozny escapes to Petrogorsk, and this family is hosted by the other Jewish family, and it's Hanukkah time, so two families are seated at the table, and the mother of the host family starts lighting Hanukkah candles and telling the history of Hanukkah. But no one listens to her because the mother of guest family tells the story of Chechen war, and their speeches are mixed in such a Flaberian way, so we can see the parallel between Maccabean war and the Chechen war, between Maccabees and Ichkerians. And I think this good straight line from the contemporary North Caucasus to the ancient history. And at the end, I wanted to show a picture of a Hanukkah candle holder, but I decided that it's going to be too literal, so I picked this picture that was taken in 1995 in Grozny, which reminds me of the other episode from Bible, I mean, the burning bush. And I think it's a good point to finish. And if you have any questions, I'll answer them.
Okay, so folks can certainly share questions in the chat, and I'm happy to read them out and pose them to Azamat, or you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand and unmute, and I'll call on you and unmute yourself.
I see the question from Shaila Dawn.
Yeah, yeah. About your book.
Yeah,
that you so modestly left until towards the end. So is it available in translation yet?
No, book is not translated into English or any other language. I have, by now I have just one story translated into English and published, and I can link it to you if you are interested. As for the book, I actually don't know how soon it's going to be translated.
Yeah, I'm sure that all of us would love to have that link, so please do.
Can I say?
Yeah, hi Milana.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Milana. I am a journalist, a Chechen journalist from Russia, and I'm here in Arizona, in Phoenix, for 1 year for a special program for journalists. And thank you, Azamat. That was very interesting. And I will definitely start to read all those books. During your presentation, I was trying to find those books you mentioned in Amazon. So thank you for this recommendations.
Yes. If someone else is interested in reading in English, you should consider that if there is an English translation, I always showed it. So when I show two versions, it is translated. When I show one version of the cover, it is not translated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So I would like to say about a little bit to say about you, as Azamat mentioned that Alisa Ganieva was like under some kind of attack by Dagestanians and people from Caucasus because of her book. Unfortunately, that's the situation that usually happens to the writers, especially to the young writers. For example, I believe that German Sadulaev, he doesn't care about anything who people think are right about him. He is just writing and he's doing it very well. And the young writers, I know some of my friends, for example, Chechen friends who was writing books about the war or anything like that. They were also criticized by Chechens themselves because, as Azamat says, that is what there wasn't any, you know, the pathos thing about the being a heroes and everything and all that kind of things that it's like in any society we have good and bad people, right? And there is no how to say, the people from Caucasus, it's not the epos about the heroes, right? And that's because people actually afraid, young writers afraid to write that kind of things, especially women. So one of my friends, she wrote a book, and she was living in Europe when she finished that book. And the book was about the pre-war and during the war period. And she was criticized by Chechens in Europe because why did you mention all that things about the Chechen religious people, that they are not so good on, and all that things, you know. And she even lost her friends because of that book, because even her friends was saying like, okay, it's true that we all know that it's true, the things like that, but why do you have to write it and tell to other people? That's the problem of the young writers. No one wants to face this critique, especially people who live in Chechnya, right? They afraid of critique. They afraid that someone will come to their families and say, okay, your sister, or I don't know, your wife, your daughter is doing like a bad thing, like trying to, how to say, trying to say, I don't, I'm sorry, it's not enough, my English not enough to explain everything that I want to say. So why does she do this? Why does she write these bad things about our ethnicity? So, and everyone understand that, like, for example, me, I could write something, right? But I don't want someone will come to my house, to my brother, and say like, just why don't you stop your sister writing that kind of things, right? That's what happened in this time, I can say, about the Chechen writers. And I know a lot of very talented men and women who know how to write, who has things to write, who has a lot of stories, interesting stories, but they are just, as we say, pишут в стол. They just writing for themselves. That's all.
Thank you for your comment. I just want to add that German Sadulaev was excluded from the Chechen ethnos by the leader of Chechnya. So he too receives a lot of hatred. But you are correct when you say that female authors are more exposed to the hatred because I don't know, maybe it's because of the difference between Ossetia and Dagestan, but maybe it's because difference between the reception of male author and female author, because in 2009 I too wrote some stories that a lot of people in Ossetia didn't like. They were satirical, but I met on the internet the response that was not complimentary, but I've never received any threatening, but Alisa Ganieva did. So I think for those people who do such thing, it is easier to attack women.
I can tell you, Azamat, that no one can, how did you say, reduced German Sadulaev from Chechen society? Or how did you say?
He's excluded.
No
yes,
one can exclude anyone from society.
Yeah, I know. I should do it this way. But no.
people who read German Sadulaev, who loves him, they accept him as a Chechen, as a, I don't know, as a writer. It's not about being a Chechen or anyone else.
Okay,
It's just being a good writer. Yeah.
There is no authority who decides who is Chechen, who is Avar, who is Ossetian. So the only way to define ethnicity is, the Chechen is the one who calls himself a Chechen, and Russian is the one who calls himself a Russian. So as long as he has such book, no one really can exclude him from the ethnos.
So Azmat, this really, I mean, it's a really interesting topic. It gets to kind of these questions of complex identity that you started off with using Kafka as an example, right? So yes, like, someone can't be excluded from the ethnos, but on the other hand, it's how they're remembered, how they're talked about. So I guess we have a question in the chat from Shelley, which I'll ask next, but I just had a question that was kind of related to this. And I wanted to kind of ask you about kind of the positive reactions, right? So are there also ways in which Ossetian or Chechen societies support these writers, right? Are there, either through individual support, or are there kind of civil society or other kinds of institutional support for these writers that seek to kind of counterbalance these forces that are trying to silence them or exclude them, and basically keep them from telling kind of the full story of their worlds and of their societies?
I don't know anything about Chechnya. I know something about Dagestan. I know that Alisa Ganieva was invited to the local television, even when her first scandalous book was released, and it was okay. As for me, I am invited to book fairs in Vladikavkaz, so it's okay too. And I know that when a new book by Stella Prudont is released, the television of Mountain Dews, which is actually based in Azerbaijan, make a report on this. So they got the reporters sent to Moscow book fair to make this short video on her. So the reactions are different, and regardless of some haters, we are welcome in our regions.
Thank you.
I can tell about Chechnya if you want to.
Okay, because I don't know about Chechnya. If you know, you tell.
Yeah, first of all, I want to tell you that no one wants, I really hope that none of these authors, Chechen authors, writers, won't be asked to come to Chechen television. If you know what I mean. There is a reputation of Chechen TV that if you are appear on Chechen TV, it means that you did something that the government didn't like, and you will be you will be asking to forgive you. It's like the Chechen forgiveness thing. It's very in a bad meaning, very popular thing. So I hope none of these authors will be asked to come to Chechen television. But I can tell about the writer, for example, again, the German Sadulaev. His books are quite popular in Chechen young society. I don't know. When I first heard about him, around more than 10 years ago, it was popular. We were exchanging that books. It wasn't a lot of his books in Chechnya, I can remember. And we just exchanging his books to one another. You know, it was like a very, how to say, a rare thing, and young people love to read German Sadulaev. And these days, I know that people who, for example, I respect, among them, these kind of writers as Alisa Ganieva and again German Sadulaev and other young North Caucasus writers are quite popular. So it's not so bad.
Great.
Thank you. Shelley, did you want to ask your question?
Oh, sure. I can, I guess, read it from the chat. So there's a pretty famous American comedy film called As Good as It Gets. And this particular movie centers around kind of an older male writer of romance novels, okay? And his novels focus a lot on female characters. And so in this film, there's a female fan who adores him, and she corners him in an elevator and she says, "How do you write women characters so well?" And this man is really sarcastic and pretty chauvinistic. And his response is, "Well, I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability." Okay, so that was like a main joke of the film. But with like the sarcasm aside, what perspectives do you bring to write authentically about female characters in your books?
Oh, thank you for this question. First of all, I should mention that I'm using first person. So I didn't like this joke, actually, because it's cynical. So I don't do it this way. For me, writing in first person is writing from the perspective of a human who has the experience that I don't have. And if the gender differs from my own, it just means that it's more complicated and there are more things that I have never experienced. So I just, it's fiction, and I create it as a fiction. When I started, I was searching for some information about how differs male speech from female speech, but then I decided that it's just gibberish, and I should focus on the experience and on the personality, not on the iconic female. So I just try to imagine this and depict the situations and their reactions just as if I was reading from the perspective of male. I have such stories too. So I often get such a response that my female characters are compelling, but when I write, as I said previously, I don't see a lot of difference in approach. Anyway, you have to create the character, and the gender is just one of the characteristics.
Okay. Thank you for that really thoughtful answer, and for, yes, I mean, a lot of this research that looks at different male and female speech, like, it can be very interesting, but if you try to write based on that, I imagine that it would really be kind of constraining and maybe do more harm than good to trying to create, fully formed characters. So Philip or Philippe has a question in the chat, but you also turned your camera on, so perhaps you'd like to ask it.
You mean the question from the chat? Yeah, could you talk about reading habits for the region?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Привет, Milana.
I can speak on the reading habits. I can't speak about the reading habits generally, but I know that in 2008, 2009, those years, my stories were shared through the internet and not on the paper. And from this fact, I conclude that reading electronically is more common than reading books. As for the short prose and for the contemporary literature, but classics maybe are still read in paper because everyone has this big bookshelves from the Soviet period.
Can I try to answer to that question?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. I can tell Philip, привет еще раз. I can tell you that in Chechnya and Ingushetia, it's of course everything nowadays, not even the PDF or electronic books, it's about the cell phones. They read everything on their smartphones, including the books. But I can tell you nowadays, when I was like last time when I was home, around half years ago, it was like a very modern thing, you know, to have a coffee and to have this book and sit in the bench somewhere in the center of the Grozny and read it, and to drink a coffee. And it's more not about the reading book, it's more about, you know, young people love attention. They love to be not like the other people, right? They want to show up somehow, and that's the good thing. As I understand, it's a good thing because that's how your habit to read starts. For example, I remember that I wanted to read something that young people like my generation didn't read that time, right? Because that time was when I was young, there was a very popular books, the love stories, you know, they just showed up in our region, and that's the kind of the protest for me. It was like to read a scientific
Science fiction?
Science fiction, something like, you know, Ray Bradbury and all those people that I was trying to be not like all other people, and that's how my habit to read started. And I hope that this reading the paper books, it's something like that, and it will be habits for young people nowadays, because as you know, there is another trend in Chechnya and all the Muslim regions of Russia happens, like the Islamization trend was several years ago started, and now a lot of religious young people you can see in Chechnya, in Grozny. And as a protest, sometimes you can see these young people with the books and the coffee, like saying, I'm not like you, you know, I'm special. And I think it's not bad.
And Instagramming it.
Of course.
Did it even happen if it's not on Instagram?
Yes.
Okay. So we're coming to the end of our hour here, but I do wonder if anybody has a final question. And Azamat, Shelley was wondering if you who enjoyed your presentation, so if along with the link to your story, if it was possible, it'd be possible to share a copy of your slides.
It's possible.
Great. That's fantastic. But we really do want that link to your story because, as I said, we do have a Melikian Center reading group. And although we've kind of read longer works, and we did just read Stepanova's In Memory of Memory from Russia, but we haven't read anyone from the North Caucasus. So this would be a great addition to our reading group. And so again, I just wonder if anyone has any final questions for Azamat before we sign off here. And if not, I do have one, and it's about language. Oh. So you mentioned that, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the last name, but Elisa
Ganieva.
Ganieva's, her first book, right? This was very revolutionary in terms of the kind of language she used, the kind of Russian, which you said was very, close to what you would hear on the streets, with Avar mixed in, as well as, you said that this was something that you also did in your own work with Ossetian. So I was wondering, in terms of writing, if Russian is really the only kind of language that these books kind of start off in, right? Has there ever, an idea to write the whole novel in Ossetian or a whole novel in Chechen, if any of these writers or if other writers have done that? I know you were focusing on Russian literature, right? So literature in Russian, but if you could say a bit about whatever, you know about kind of literature in the languages themselves.
Yes, I know a bit. Actually, in North Ossetia, we have two literary magazines. One called is Daryal. It publishes fiction and poetry in Russian, and the other is called Marduk. It's something like Our Time. It publishes fiction, poetry, and even plays written in Ossetian. But of course, people read more literature which is written in Russian because people speak Russian more than Ossetian. Especially people who are interested in books and so on. I've been to a book fair on the Red Square this summer, and I visited the that stand dedicated to the regions, and there was a public talk about local literatures. And you know that there is no such ethnic as Dagestanians. There are different people from Dagestan, and the languages are quite different. And there was a man who is the only Karatinian writer. Karatins is a small ethnic group from Dagestan, and he is the only who writes in this language. So I think it seems to me that those literatures are maybe kind of academic, rare bird, something for the specialists, but not for the readers. So that's what I know. Again, I don't know what is going on in Kabardino-Balkaria or Chechnya. As for the mixing languages within Russian text, that what everybody does. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of authors mentioned today do. Alisa Ganieva does, I do, and Stella Prudont too does so. She mixes Russian with Jewry. That's the name of the Mountain Jews language. But I don't know if the literature in Jewry exists.
Can I add?
Yeah.
So I can tell that it's actually the language issue, the language problem. It's our pain for ethnos, for our ethnos and other ethnoses in North Caucasus. We have so-called the dead language, not dead, but dying language. That's how we call it. I'm not sure if it's correct, but it's the languages that probably will disappear. In Chechen language is unfortunately there's no the popular writer in Chechnya who's writing in our language. And for example, in Dagestan, right, in Avar people, they know their language much better than Chechen knows. Chechen people know their language, because we have also, as Azamat says, we have this mixed language, Chechen Russian mixed language. When we talk to each other, we use this one. We have some newspapers on Chechen language, but no one interested these days about these newspapers, unfortunately. For example, for Dagestan, for Avar people, they know their language better, as I understand, because Dagestan is bigger, and the people, the Avar villages, they are they far from the Makhachkala, right? And the destination is bigger, and they live somewhere in the mountains, and they save their language as it was like 100 years ago, and they still speak their language. They don't need the Russian language, the Russian words to interact to each other, right? So Chechnya is quite the place where everyone lives very close to each other, and it's mono-ethnical language, and Russian is more engaged to everywhere than, for example, in some Avar village in Dagestan. And that's the big, huge problem. And for now, we even don't have writers who ready to write in Russian language. And unfortunately, I don't think that like next 10 years, we will have someone like a popular writer who will write in Chechen language. That's the big problem.
I heard from Alisa Ganieva that in Makhachkala, in Kizlar, Derbent, and the towns and cities of Dagestan, not the villages, where different people live, because they can't understand each other. Avars don't understand Lezgins and so on. They prefer to speak Russian.
They prefer, but that what surprised me when I was like doing my journalistic job a couple of years ago in Dagestan. I was doing the report about the sheep holders, pastuhi. I don't know how you call them in English. Shepherds, yeah. So I was doing the report about them, and I went from the Khasavyurt to the mountains with them during 3 days. And there was 3 of them, and there were 3 different ethnicity: one Avar, one Lezgin, and one Kumyk. And the language that they used to understand each other, it was Russian, but the words that they used was like, it's like, maybe they used 5 Russian words a day, like bring it, take it, like go there, come here, something like that. It so surprised me. I was thinking that the Russian language in Dagestan should be better than in, for example, in Chechnya, because it's a common language, but it's not. And again, the reason of it, it's not about books, sorry, but it's like I really interested about this topic. I was thinking, why is that? It's because those villages, those ethnic groups, they live in their villages and they don't need to much interact to each other, right? So there is, as you know, there is a village in Dagestan, for example, Kubachi village, and they doing the silver jewelry thing, right?
Yeah.
And they don't need to interact with some sheepers, right? So sheepers live in their in the mountains, and they don't need to interact with the people from Kubachi, and that's how they just don't need this language a lot. That's because languages in Dagestan saved much better than it saved than the languages in other regions, as I understand.
So I think, I mean, in many ways, in the North Caucasus, as well as the South Caucasus, you have a story of kind of colonialism and contact and the legacies of this in language. You know, what languages sort of survive through, in some cases, isolation, and also what languages come out of contact, right? You know, so this shepherd pigeon, as they say in linguistics, right? This language that's comes out of necessity through interaction in a particular context. In this case, this context being sheep herding. So what an interesting discussion we've had, really kind of coming out of this really rich presentation that Azamat shared about contemporary North Caucasus Russian literature, well defined at the beginning of the presentation for all of us. I agree with Charlie that this was a really terrific program, and that it's hopefully motivated many of us to seek out the books and read them. Certainly for those of us, you know, for those of you who need to read the Rooks in translation, I know that you, like me, are hoping to see more of these books available in English. I saw that Prudon's book was available in Italian,
Yes.
but not in English. But hopefully we will look forward to seeing it in English in the future. But I just want to take a second here. I know we're past our time to really wholeheartedly thank Azamat for taking the time to share, again, such a rich and interesting presentation, so generously focusing on the works of fellow authors, and kind of, you know, again, giving the kind of blurb that we all, as if we were authors, would like to see, right? This really intriguing little bit of what the book is without any spoilers, but to get us interested in this work, and what the authors have also had to, you know, kind of deal with in producing this work in their context today. So on behalf of our audience here and the Melikian Center, just a really huge thank you to Azamat for this presentation.